Are you craving a life of adventure? Most of us are, especially us men. Today's guest has been on screen in Marvel's Black Panther. He's performed on stages and in other films all over the world, and his journey to overcome the pain in his own life has led Adam Pendicini to invite you to step out of your comfort zone and live a life of adventure.
Men, this is your chance to strive for greatness, to be all you can be, to make your mark on history. Your chance to improve and sharpen yourself, to grapple with your weaknesses and turn them into strength. Welcome to the Manlihood Mancast with Josh Hatcher.
Gentlemen, welcome to the Manlihood Mancast. I'm your host, Josh Hatcher. I'm so glad that you're with us today. Listen, don't forget to share this episode and to help us spread the word about the work we're doing here at Manlihood. Listen, also, we've got a contest for you. We're giving away a fantastic knife. It's an everyday carry knife by Haynes Knives, and you can see it at our website if you go to manlihood.com/contests. We're going to be giving this away really soon, so I want you to go and enter so that we can get this in your hands, and you can enter for a chance to win.
This is the Manlihood Mancast.
So today's special guest is Adam Pendicini. He is a man of many talents, from his career as an actor to his passion for fitness and adventure and dance. But his journey hasn't been without some challenges. And today he's going to talk about resilience, healing, and the power of listening. So get ready for this great conversation with Adam Pendicini on the Manlihood Mancast. Adam, it's so great to have you on the Manlihood Mancast today. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. You've done some pretty cool things in your life. So why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself and some of the things you do, man?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I suppose it's always trying to get that elevator pitch down pat so you can kind of condense everything down into a short bite-sized piece. But originally from Australia, and I live in Utah now with my family, and I grew up in sort of suburban Australia, and my parents separated early, and I kind of was, it'd be fair to say sort of those early years, I didn't really have a father figure sort of directing me. My stepfather was a big influence, but I didn't really have that connection. And then early through, I had only got diagnosed with ADHD a couple of years ago, and I'm 44 now. So I've kind of lived a life kind of not knowing, but also probably knowing, when you think back and really look at it. So when I review or sort of look back in my earlier years, there was kind of that home environment. There was the ADHD, and then I had a sexual abuse incident when I was about 8. So those first 8 years were pretty significant and really shaped sort of who I am as a person. And then from that point on, it was sort of a little bit of survival mode, but it was also very much about trying to find out where I thrived, what parts of my personality shine, and how I was able to sort of create a presence for myself with those, in that situation, with those experiences. And a lot of that came around discovering sort of my physical ability. I've always been really active and been really talented, I suppose, with fitness and training. And I'm sort of, my wife thinks I'm annoying because, I can pretty much do any sport and, and be quite competitive. So she finds that frustrating. But that was sort of that was my go-to. That was my ability to sort of create an identity for myself. And then, I went to school in Australia. I played Australian rules football, which people think it's rugby, but it's not. It's a different game to rugby. And I was quite competitive that and played semi-professionally. And around when I finished high school, there was always this, because I didn't really thrive in the education system, it's trying to work out what you wanted to do and being pushed down this agenda of education and, college or university. And that was, in hindsight, probably it was definitely the wrong mindset for myself. I did manage to get into college and I did an arts degree and I majored in drama. And that's sort of really where sort of things took a big turn for me. And I realized that there's performing arts was something that I really enjoyed and wanted to pursue. And so after my 3-year degree, at that point I was, started going to sort of nightclubs and going out a bit more. And people were coming and asking me if I was a dancer and I wasn't. But it sort of sparked this interest in me to potentially think about dancing. So a friend of mine, we went to and did a dance class. And at the end of the dance class, the principal of the school saw me in class and invited me to on the spot to join their full-time program. Wow. And so when I finished my degree, I then at 24 started dancing, and I'd never danced before. And that was kind of the beginning of the end, because as soon as I finished my year of training, I got a job working on a cruise ship and dancing on the production shows. They have big production shows with singers and lights and stage and all sorts of things. And at that point, being 25, I was like, this is amazing. A young single guy getting to travel the world, dancing and performing. And so that sort of set me on a trajectory of something that I'd never really anticipated, particularly in high school. And I think if I had that concept or that on my radar early on, I probably would have had a little bit more of a positive outlook about what I was going to do with my life. So then, I had a career as a professional dancer for about 12 years, working as an actor as well, living in London. Then I moved back to Australia, and then I moved to Sydney, and then in Sydney is where I met my wife. And then we moved to London, and then we moved to LA, pursuing my acting career there. All along this time, I was also been a fitness trainer and coach. And so it's sort of been always the cliched LA actors, you're an actor and a personal trainer. So that was I definitely ticked that box. And then, we had our first child, Sequoia, and then I got a job working for a fitness company out in Utah during the pandemic. So I was teaching live classes, called iFit is the company, and that was an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. And while it was amazing, we kind of put all our chips on the table and we moved out here, bought a house to be near the studio, and then kind of overnight when the pandemic finished, so did the live classes. And that's kind of where we ended up in a place called Logan, which is north of Salt Lake City. And so that's sort of kind of where we are. We live in this beautiful house, but it's mountains all around. And for someone who enjoys the wilderness and outdoor activities, it's kind of an idyllic spot for us to be in. And I don't think it'll be forever, but we're enjoying it for now.
Yeah. Wow, man, you definitely have accomplished and experienced a lot. And I want to try to touch on a lot of those separate areas of your life, because I feel like you're the kind of guy that like we would probably sit up around a fire like all night for weeks to unpack everything. So, so all right. So let me ask you about your acting career, because I think you've got some kind of like you've got at least a couple, big movies in your what do you call it? Your resume, right?
Yeah, the IMDb page. Yeah, I suppose. Look, to be honest, the acting career, I think really for me was a lot of it was to be on stage, and doing a lot of theatre was sort of really where I had done most of my work. It still wasn't, a very, financially successful career in terms of that, but it was just something that I really enjoyed. And I worked with the Australian Shakespeare Company, and I played Puck in a season there, and lots of other theatre. And so that was kind of the intention of moving to LA, was to try to pursue the film and TV situation there. And you know, I've done a couple of films since, and it's just always one of those things. I enjoyed doing it, and you know, at this point in time, you know, there's the dream of making it a full-time career is probably gone, but the passion for it and being on set and being creative, and I think it's the element of being creative is probably the thing that draws me to the art of acting. And so, yeah, it's definitely a passion. It's probably taught me a lot more about myself than that I've actually got out of, you know, the being an actor and being on set or doing a film or something like that. It's the big learning or the big outcome from being an actor or being immersed in that performing arts is more about what I've learned about myself and the skill of, you know, with every character you want to be connected with your emotional state. And so if you're an actor that's disconnected with their emotional state or who they are as an individual, then it's really hard to translate that to a character. And a lot of the training that I've done over the years has been around that, have been around evolving myself and understanding myself, my triggers, and, you know, if you want to cry on set or if you want to be angry on set, you know, it's tapping into those, that emotional toolbox and ability to be able to access that for the character and give your own interpretation. I think a lot of people think that acting is about playing a character, and really what it is making an offering of my own experience in the interpretation of that actor. So the more you can bring of yourself to the character, the more unique it would be, and that's really where the skill is.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. And you know, it's interesting because you talk about having to rely on the past and your own triggers to be able to access almost somebody else that you're playing, you know, and that would, like, I can see where it would be a very emotionally demanding role. And if you're not walking into it healthy, you know, it's no wonder that a lot of actors get sucked into the cycle of, you know, drug abuse and alcoholism and all those things, because it's like, yeah, you're dealing with some raw emotion there. So you kind of have to be healthy walking into it.
Yeah, exactly, and that really is a big part of sort of class and being in class. And if you have a good teacher, will be able to nurture that and understand it, and, you know, push when necessary and try to help with those blocks. But there's definitely a fine line of pushing an actor, or, you know, too far and getting them to uncover trauma or parts of themselves. It doesn't even need to be trauma, but just having a realistic introspection of who they are as a person and bringing that out. So that's really where the craft lies, I think.
I know a lot of guys struggle. There was a guy that was in our Facebook group recently who posted something to the effect of, "I'm giving up. Like, I'm not dreaming anymore. I'm sick of having these big dreams and having them shattered," you know. And he's just like gonna, you know, just the idea of resigning himself to a job he hates, blah blah blah. The whole thing. It was actually a really neat post, because I know that while he was kind of, you know, looking at the negative side of it, it's something I think that most men feel, right? When they realize, okay, I had the dream to do something big, and now I have to alter, you know, or make a change, or it wasn't what I expected, and now I've got to do this. Was it like that for you when you said, okay, I still love to act, but that's not going to be my main career for the rest of my life? Was that hard for you to come to that realization?
Yeah, I suppose in some ways there probably is a little bit of that, and if I really think about it. And I think in contrast, you know, we moved out here for this job, and working in this on the TV show and doing live classes was kind of like this dream job for me, because I was teaching fitness, which I've done all my life. I was doing live classes. I was on camera. I had a full TV studio. So that for me was kind of like my substitute. You know, in some ways I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is my my making it type moment. And since that's finished, I have been thinking about that probably more so now, and going, okay, well, where am I at, and what's my objective, and what's my goal, or what do I want to achieve? But a lot of my life so far has been just very intuitive, and I've been very good about just listening to what makes me happy. And I think a lot of people, I've been really resistant to doing things or being in an environment that doesn't fulfill me, or doesn't excite me, or doesn't challenge me. And I think you can still give up on, the big grandiose dream. Maybe it's the being a CEO of a company, or an acting career, or whatever it is. But I still think that there's ways to really thrive in your life and create new meaning and opportunities for ourselves. And I think it's just a matter of being willing to try new things, to be open to it. And for acting as well, my wife always says to me, she says, "Oh, when are you going to give up on the acting dream?" I was like, "Well, what's the oldest character you've ever seen on TV?" And then she'll say, like some grandma or grandpa. I was like, okay, well, there's still roles for me to play no matter what. So for me, there's this comforting element to know that I can be this, an old codger. And acting's not about fame, and it's about the process, and it's about being on set and being creative. And that's what I enjoy. I did a film a couple of months ago, and it's kind of the first one I'd done for a while. And I was like, just a breath of comfort being in that environment. And and I've got a couple of other scripts that I'm reading, and another film that we're sort of in the early stages of putting together. So there's always just that in the back of my mind, that there's that possibility. And I like a variety. I like change. I like different things. And so for me, having those films in the background, or working on a project, it kind of suffices, and I'm comfortable with that setup, and I'm realistic, because I have so many other things that I enjoy, and I get a lot of love out of.
It's part of the challenge. I can relate to being an adult diagnosed with ADHD, right? Because a lot of times people like us, we're good at a lot of different things. And so we have to kind of juggle with, okay, well, I'm going to do 5 things today instead of just one thing. And it's just kind of the way it goes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's totally like, the quintessential stereotype of someone with ADHD is they need that variety, or they need that different stimulus. And so I'm really aware of it now, and but it's what kind of keeps my life interesting. My wife hates it, because I have a new $1 million idea every day, and
Yes.
and so she's getting better at tempering my ideas. But I think when it's just that element and trust in myself, and this real desire to find things that bring me joy as much as possible, and I've been able to do that. I don't have fancy cars and lots of big houses, but I'm definitely very financially we're stable and secure, so there's nothing to worry about there. But when I look back on my life, as a dancer, as an actor, and all the travel that I've done, and other jobs and opportunities, it's just, for me, what's really important is the richness of my life, and the relationships that I've built over the years, the experiences that I've had. And I think that just, for me, has been really satisfying to look back and go, okay, this is what I've done so far. And I'm really proud of that journey. And I just, with all those skill sets, with all these things that I've kind of built up over the years, I'm just excited to see how I can implement them and use them in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So I know you've got a business that focuses on fitness and adventure. Let's talk about that, because as I was reading it, I'm getting excited, because I live here in, kind of in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, in the middle of the Allegheny National Forest, and the The idea of adventure is something that I understand well, so I can kind of relate to you there. Tell me about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I suppose the business really came to fruition about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it was a it was kind of like the end of the pandemic, and kind of, okay, we're now in a location that realistically would never have moved out here, if I'd had the choice in terms of for lifestyle. And so it was trying to work out what I wanted and how I could make a living. And I kind of have three pillars that I understand now that are really important to me as an individual. One is introspection work, or work on myself, whether that's meditation, journaling, being in therapy. The other one is movement, and then the other one for me is adventure, like getting outside and going on an adventure. And so I've kind of been on this growth journey that I'm calling it, probably for about 8 years now. And because I was sort of feeling a little, even though I felt like I had a lot of success in my life, I also felt that I was calling it the 10%, I was missing 10% in my life. So I really wanted to dive deep and find out what was happening and where everything was coming from, and my behavior. And part of that journey was to get the diagnosis of ADHD. I also thought I was dyslexic, and so I got tested for that. And ironically, I'm not dyslexic, which it was kind of ironically I felt a little bit disappointed, because I'm not a great speller, and I felt like that was what I thought that's what the issue was. But it turns out, and this part of my journey is my therapist thinks that, sort of that childhood trauma, and when we're learning, and the skill of learning, I kind of is really disruptive for me. So now when I look back at having ADHD and then difficulty of learning, it was probably not because I was dyslexic or I had problems with that. I just wasn't in an environment that nurtured my learning ability or my circumstance and situation. So fast forward to now, it was part of my expression or journey was to, my therapist suggested I be in a men's group. And for me, a men's group just sounded a little bit too woo-woo, or maybe a religious kind of connotation, and it didn't really sit well with me. And a friend of mine, her boyfriend was in a men's group. I was talking to her, she goes, oh, he's just finishing his men's group. And I thought, maybe I could join his men's group. And it turns out their men's group had just finished, and then he suggested to me, maybe we should start our own one, and so then there's no there's no bias, there's no agenda that's made. It's just a group of guys that got together, and we had a conversation. And it turns out that we had 4 guys started this original men's group, and that's kind of where some of the biggest growth that I've ever had was just allowing myself an opportunity to have conversations with guys in an environment that was safe, that we felt heard, and there was no judgment. And then so that part of me, I was like, this is probably the missing part of my life, that I needed to have these authentic, genuine conversations with. That it was all virtually. I'd met 2 of the guys just once, just through my friend, and so we've just got to know each other over the years now, and it's a brotherhood that I'd be lost without now. And so when I look at what's really worked for me, and they're the 3 things. So the men's group, the therapy, the work that I was doing there. When I go outside, when I go on adventures, even if it's going for a run in the hills, or just a weekend away, or even just a day trip doing something, that's when I really connect. And then obviously just a regular health program. So that were the 3 pillars. And I thought, okay, this is what I like. I like coaching. I like helping people. And then I realized that there was a real shortage for guys, particularly. And for my demographic of guys who are really professional, they've got kids, but they've sort of prioritized their work life over their personal life and their well-being. and they feel disconnected because they're not going out partying, they're not seeing their friends all the time. And so that's kind of where my business idea came. And the business is called Adventure Fit. And it's a 6-week program where they do training, which is 3 days a week. And then there's 2 mental health days or coaching where they're doing meditation, journaling, breath work. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, they do an adventure. They can either do that in person or they come to Utah, and then I take them on a 3-day wilderness experience. There's coaching with me, weekly sessions, and then the men's group is something that we do each week as well. So the group gets together, and then I facilitate a conversation. And then if they want as well, then they can do a full blood panel as well. I work with a holistic doctor. So, it's a really broad spectrum of health concepts and ideas sort of brought together in a community format that culminates with an adventure that for a lot of the guys is something they've wanted to do for a long time, or they've been thinking about doing something. For a lot of them, one guy he lived in Albuquerque, and there's a ridgeline that he's been looking at since he was a kid. And he remember as a kid, he wanted to do it. And so this was his opportunity to do this ridgeline. I had another guy in the group who was estranged from his father and hadn't spoken to his sister in years. And through the men's group and the support, he reached out to his father, invited him for dinner, and his sister came along and kind of rekindled his relationship with his sister. So, it really is a program that helps guys in all facets of their lives. And it's only 30 minutes a day, and I break it up into 3 10-minute blocks because I think time is one of the biggest excuses that I hear guys say, I just don't have the time. And so I break down all the sessions into 10-minute blocks. And so the conversation is, could you do 10 minutes of self-care? And obviously everyone's like, yeah, I could do 10 minutes. And so it just creates this behavior and this appreciation that looking after ourselves doesn't need to be this hour, full-on sweat session at a gym. It could just be some movement at home or some breath work or a 10-minute walk. And so that's kind of where the program and how it's all set up.
I love it. Yeah, I'm kind of on some of that journey myself at the moment. When I started my new job, so I'm working from home, I decided, you know what, I'm going to take a walk every day. And like I have struggled with my weight, my fitness, over the years. And I was kind of I don't know if I was at the heaviest I've ever been, but I'm up there. And I just said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. So I started just saying, all right, now that I've got a little more freedom in my schedule, I'm going to go for a walk every morning or evening, whichever I've got time to do. And started out with a mile a day. And now I can do, now I'm doing a minimum of a mile a day. But some days if I'm feeling better, and just in that 1 month, dude, like just taking, and it usually takes me, if I'm doing a mile, it's usually about half an hour, cause I'm slow, but, maybe it's a little bit less, but by the time I drive to the trail that I'm walking, but anyway, my point though is like, I can't get over how much clearer I think, how much better I feel like emotionally and everything else, just because I'm doing that every day. And now my clothes are fitting better. Right. And I've got more energy and the pain is getting better. Before that, I just kept making excuses, and yeah, now that I've made it a priority, I realize I should have made it a priority a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it really is hard. And that's what I have learned over the years. And I think for me personally, the correlation is, I still have difficulty with learning and sort of sitting down and doing, study or something like that. And so I use that same philosophy of what I use with training for myself. It's like, for me, getting up at 5:30, 6 o'clock every day to go train is just, it's embedded in me and for my mum. So for me, that's really easy. But a lot of the coaching and the way I frame it for guys who are trying to get back into fitness and trying to create that, I use that same teaching for myself when it comes to study or when it comes to doing the work that I don't want to do. It's always the conversations like, okay, Adam, could I do 15 minutes of study now? Could I do this item that I've been putting off for a long time? Let's do that first, and then create some momentum and, creating a reward system. And so that conversation is very similar to when I'm coaching clients. It's allowing everyone to know that they've got a ground zero that they can start from. And if it's a mile walk a day, then great. And some people, even a mile might be too long. And so for me, it's like, could you do 10 minutes? Could you have 15 minutes? And could you do that, 3 times a week for a month? And so we just all of a sudden just recalibrate what is possible for everyone, because I think we just get caught into this perpetual comparison of what fitness is, and fitness means lots of different things to different people. And so that having that conversation with guys and saying, okay, look, at the moment you're doing very little to no exercise, and the benefits are really important for your longevity, your quality of life. And so let's just start with something, and all of a sudden we can recalibrate the way people see their fitness journey. And it doesn't need to be going to the gym, and it doesn't need to be doing this high intensity workout. Maybe you'll get there, but for now, let's just stay in this lane and think about what we can achieve. And it's really about nurturing guys and allowing them that to feel vulnerable enough to admit that, because I think we always like, oh, I used to this, I used to that, I was in the college basketball, I used to play football, and so it's like, okay, that's great, but what's your current situation? What's your reality of your life now, and how can we improve that? And a lot of that conversation is just breaking it down and making it really achievable for everyone.
Yeah, that's really honestly the secret to any habit, is breaking it down to the smallest, that you've got to do, and then saying, I'm going to do this step every day, and then building on it. It makes sense to me, and it's worked. So,
yeah.
So,
how long's that been going for you?
So it's about a month that I've been doing that, and
Great.
I mean, I've done it before. When I first got diagnosed with ADHD, they gave me Adderall.
Yep.
And, like that year that I was on Adderall, like I lost 100 pounds, right? Like,
wow.
And just because like I had all this crazy energy, and I wrote like 6 books and did all these crazy things that I've always wanted to do. And then I had a heart attack because, Adderall and energy drinks and stress and not really properly managing things. So the doctor's like, no more Adderall for you. And the other drug they give you for ADHD just didn't do anything for me. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to manage this with black coffee in the morning and a little common sense. But, so like I'm no stranger to building habits, but I've found that, sometimes when you get in that emotional space, and that's kind of where I wanted to steer the conversation next, when you start realizing that a lot of the decisions that you're making today, the food that you eat, or the alcohol that you drink, or the sedentary lifestyle that you're choosing to live in. And alcohol isn't my thing, but food and sedentary, whatever your vice is, it's usually coming from a place in you that's broken. And, you talked about some childhood trauma. I don't know how much detail you're comfortable talking about, but I know that a lot of our guys have trauma in varying degrees. So maybe you could help us walk through that process of healing and what that looks like.
Yeah. So it was, I was 7 when it happened. I'm 44 now, so it was sort of the mid 80s that it had happened, and the context was that my mum was doing aerobics class. It was big in the 80s, and mum would go to this gym, and I would wait outside in the foyer while she was doing the class, and there was a gentleman at the reception, and it probably happened, it progressively. What's the grooming process, I suppose, when I think back about it, and there was gifts, and then there was invitations to go to the bathroom, and then it sort of progressed from there, and there was I think it happened, maybe 3 or 4 times, and progressively getting more advanced each time. And then to the point where, I obviously got so uncomfortable with what was happening. And it was, sort of making me touch him and that sort of stuff. And I expressed that to Mum. And of course, my Mum rang the police straight away, and the police came over. And I remember vividly sitting on my toy box and telling the police kind of everything that had happened, and kind of in graphic detail. And then, and that was it. Never spoken about again. The police told my parents, it's best you don't bring it up again, and it's best you don't talk about it. And so, I've just started primary school or elementary school. I've got excessive excess energy, couldn't sit still, and I'm kind of yearning for tenderness and protection from a male figure, and I was just violated everything as that whole protection network. And so then became this not armor, because I'm actually a really sensitive person. But what happened is I created this rage inside me, and I was never violent to people, but I was extremely destructive. If I was having a tantrum, I would smash windows and punch holes in walls and destroy my bedroom. And I just didn't have an outlet, and I had never dealt with the trauma. There was never a conversation. There was no nurturing around it. And it probably wasn't until I started going to therapy myself I think I was 24, 25, that I sort of talked about it a little bit more. And then also acting class was a real avenue for me to tap into that childhood trauma and tap into the protection of my younger self. And so today, as an adult and a father of 2 kids, I'm really aware of the impact that it's had on me. But the other thing that's strangely weird is there's almost a thankful, not thankful, but because it's happened to me, it's created a resilience, or it's created an experience for me that has created a depth or a well of emotional maturity that I'm able to draw from now. And that's probably also part of my journey, is that, in my Adventure Fit program is allowing guys that opportunity to share, their darkest secrets or fears or danger. And a big part of my own journey was I just really wanted to come to terms with who I was as a person, and a lot of I had a shame around what I called my intelligence, or what I was thinking was my lack of intelligence. I felt dumb. And that was kind of the internal dialogue that I was having a lot of the time. And through my therapy and work, I was able to identify that was a narrative that I was telling myself. And part of my coming to terms with it, or overcoming, was to actually have conversations with my parents about it as well, because in my family environment with my stepfather and my mum and my sister, they're all very academic and held quite senior positions at work, and I definitely didn't have that studious ability that they had. And so in my own family environment, it was kind of reflected back. I was experiencing a feeling of not being as intelligent as my family. And so, the one place you should feel most thriving and feel most confident is in that family environment. And so My therapist wanted me to read because part of my fear or anxiety comes around if I have to read out loud to people or spell. I literally have this nervous shutdown where, I can't spell. Like, I've misspelt my names sometimes. It's like someone's standing over my shoulder watching me write, then I will make a mistake. My brain kind of shuts down. And so part of that, overcoming that fear, was to read to my parents. So I rang my mum first and I read to her. And obviously there was a lot of build up in anticipation and confronting this fear that I'd had for so many years. And so it was a very emotional experience. And then part of that conversation with my mum was just to be open and upfront about what I felt as a kid I didn't get. And it wasn't I didn't tell my mum because I wanted her to feel bad. I wanted to tell my mum because I needed to release that and share that with my mum. So I did that with my mum, and then I did that with my stepfather as well. My stepfather had been in my life since I was around 2, so he's definitely been a big impact, or have a big impact on me. And he was actually a whitewater kayak instructor, and that's how my mum met my stepfather, and that's how I got into whitewater kayaking and all the adventure sports as well. So he's definitely been a huge influence on me as a person. But I had to have the same conversation with him, and I had to kind of confront him and sort of express my sadness around how I didn't feel protected as a kid growing up. And again, that was an extremely emotional conversation to have. But then I had to ring my father, my birth father as well. And he's a joker. He lives in Australia, and he's kind of like the fun uncle. I kind of describe him like that. And I by and far, he was the most. I was the most apprehensive and nervous about speaking to him about everything that had gone on, and because I've never had that kind of conversation with him ever. And so I had to text him first and say, hey, look, I've been doing some therapy work, and there's something that I'd really like to talk to you about, and I'd like you to make sure that you're in a private place, because the kind of where I've been leading with this story is obviously he never knew about the sexual abuse. He wasn't in my life at that time, and so I spoke to mum about it, and she said, yeah, she had never mentioned it to him, and I'd never spoken to him about it. And so part of my conversation with him was to confront my shame. I read to my father, and then I had to tell him as well. And telling my father at 43 years old what had happened to me as a 7-year-old was definitely one of probably the most confronting conversations I've ever had to have. And I remember telling my dad, and he was at work. Luckily, he was in his office, but he wailed. He wailed like I've never heard anyone. And the pain that my dad felt in that moment, to hear his son, his only son, share a story that happened to him as a 7-year-old was pretty significant. And I kind of told him everything that had happened. And the most bizarre sort of experience was for me that I hadn't anticipated telling him and what his response was. But the empathy that I created for myself being a parent, and it was like I was telling him, I realized as I was telling him that I was sharing the news from a parent to another parent. I was telling him, son to father, but in the moment when I realized his reaction, I realized in that moment I was a parent telling another parent what had happened to his son. And that really was a big moment for me, because wow, that's what it would be like to be a father or a parent and to have your child tell you after 32 years what had happened to them as a kid when you weren't around to protect them, what that must have felt like for him. And the most beautiful thing has happened as a result is that, I'm still not super close to my father. I mean, when I say not close, we don't talk every day, and, we've kind of definitely had our separate lives. But when we speak now, there's so much more meaning to it. There's depth to the conversation. There's interest in his life, and he's expressing what has been going on in his life. And where before it was very transactional type conversations, it wasn't meaningful. And now the conversations are filled with a lot of respect and a lot of love. And it's just brought us closer. And for me personally, there's a sense of trauma or shedding that I've shared with my birth father, and I feel lighter for having shared that with him, and I feel closer to him for sharing that experience. And he's a smoker, and he's had a triple bypass himself, and he's at an age now where he had a big party life, and so part of me knows that there may come a time where I'm going to get that call, and I now feel so comfortable with the conversation and everything that I told him and the relationship that we have, that when that day comes, that I'll feel comfortable with that closure, and not, I wish I'd said this, or I wish I'd said these things, or told him these things. So yeah, it's been a really powerful, last couple of years, 5 years, that sort of really dive deep, and that's where I've come out the other side, and really want to share that experience with guys now, and help as many other guys as I can to discover where their true power and possibility is.
I really appreciate you sharing it with us, because I know that generally men will generally fall into the category of your dad, where we like to be the joker and have, we like to be the fun uncle, and our buddy conversations are usually the fun stuff. And it's hard for us sometimes to get deep, to get open, and to get raw. But gosh, I'm going to tell you what, the most important relationships in my life are the people that I've done that with. And I can relate, and I understand, man. And I appreciate you sharing it. And I'm hoping that our listeners are listening to this and they say, it's time to unload some of this junk I've been carrying around,
Yeah, exactly. I just, and I think a lot of people have reservations around doing it, because they think that there's this element of blame, that we're blaming the other person, or the parent, or the guardian. And really what it is that it's a releasing of this tension and these blocks in our body, in our nervous system. And so many of us, and particularly guys, and that's where a lot of our aggression comes from, and frustration and anger is this: we haven't had a vehicle or a vocabulary to share in the moment, or an experience. And so we swallow that, we hold back on the emotion, we don't express the emotion, and then that just creates this resilience and aggression, and all of us, eventually that nervous system just becomes overloaded, and that's when we have our outbursts, and we get into a fight, or we have an argument with our partner, or we're explosive towards our children, and so the more we can stay regulated with that nervous system and tap into those emotions, and if we're constantly thinking about a friend, or that we need to have a conversation with, or whatever it is, and it's a skill to be able to do that, because you don't know what the reaction of the other person is going to be. But I always think that if you can have those conversations from a place of an offering, and a place of compassion and understanding to the other person, then I think most of the time that's well received, and and you feel better for it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Adam, let me ask you a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests. I think you'll have some good insight here. What does it take to be a man?
For me, I think being a man is about listening. And I say that because I think so much of our intuition is to protect and to serve and to do. But I think we can still do all those things, but first we need to learn to listen. And being a man, we're always wanting to impose our opinion or our, even just to help, or even, it could be a simple thing around the house, but learning to really actively listen what the other person is trying to tell us or communicate to us really allows us a scope to facilitate best as the masculine. And I think when we can do that, we can really thrive in that masculine identity. And it can be the protector, it can be the provider, it can be all of those things. But if we're not doing those things from a place of listening to the world or listening to ourselves even, what does the body need? What does my mind need? What is my nervous system telling me? What is my wife telling me? What are the kids? What's work telling me? What are these things that are going on? And if I can really stop and listen to those things, I think we can really execute and really thrive as men.
Excellent advice. Excellent. Adam, if you were to be able to hop in a time machine and go back to the 1980s and talk to 10-year-old Adam, what are you going to tell him?
It's going to be just the utmost love. Because I think that 10-year-old boy needed love. He needed protection, and he needed to know that it was going to be okay. And I know that now as a parent, we don't need to buy things. We don't need to, give them fancy holidays or whatever. They just want our time, and they just want our love. And when we can give them the time, we're giving them that love. And my 10-year-old self would really appreciate that time. He would appreciate that connection and that space to be able to just be heard and be seen and to explore and to feel the love from another male.
Next question is, what is your best advice for the men that are listening today?
Well, I think it's one of the quotes or phrases that I use with my coaching is, adventure's not what you do, it's how you think. And I think if we can have an adventurous mind, then I think we can really create a fun and enjoyable life. And adventure is, you're adventurous in the way of being inquisitive, because I always use the concept of being in the wilderness and not knowing where you're going to go, so you look at a map, or you've got a hill before you can get to the outlook or the view or the moment. And so when we can instill a sense of adventure in our everyday life, then we're able to really create that wonder and unique experience on a day-to-day life. So for me, it's just trying to find as much adventure in your everyday life and just trying to have a mindset of adventure and seeking adventure in your everyday life.
What would you say is your best adventure that you've had so far?
It's going to sound cliche, but I just think my life in general is an adventure. I don't know where we're going to be in 6 months, where we're going to live. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know where I'm going to be. And for me, that is just the greatest gift that I've given myself, is just this unpredictability. And I know a lot of people couldn't live like that, but for me, that really is what I what I like to have. And yeah, I'm just excited about my adventure that I'm on, and who knows where I'll end up.
I love it. Definitely. Cause I mean, like you can have all your little mini adventures, right? Hiking the Grand Canyon or parasailing or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But viewing life itself as an adventure has, it brings a freedom and risk and thrill to it,
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. Okay, so let's say our listeners want to connect with you and the work that you're doing. What's the best way for them to make that happen?
All the socials. Luckily for me, I'm Adam Pendicini is the only Adam Pendicini in existence in the world. So all you need to do is type in my name. But yeah, I've got a website there, and Adam Pendicini on Instagram, and just all the usual socials. But yeah, adampendicini.com for my Adventure Fit program, and then the socials as well.
Awesome. We'll look forward to checking it out, man. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story and your journey with us. Any closing thoughts before we close out?
No, just find the adventure in the everyday, and live as joyfully as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Josh.
Special thanks again to Adam Pendicini for being our guest today. Thank you, man. It was very insightful and helpful for us guys as we're trying to figure out our place in the world. So this is good stuff, guys. If any of you guys want to connect with Adam, don't forget to look in the show notes. We'll have a link to his social profiles and his website there. And guys, please make sure that you tell somebody about the Manlihood Mancast. If this episode was helpful to you at all, share it with a friend. And hop on to Spotify and iTunes and leave us a rating and review. If you're watching on YouTube, comment on this episode and like it. Also subscribe to the channel, because that helps us to get the word out and helps us to show the algorithms that this content is valuable. And that happens when you interact with it, when you share it, when you leave a review. So guys, I just want to thank you again for listening in. Don't forget our contest, our giveaway for the knife that we're giving away from Haynes Knives. And you can see that at manlihood.com/contests. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you guys tuning in today. Just want you to know that I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Manlihood Mancast. If you want to be a better husband, father, leader, a better man, you need to join our private Facebook group, the Manlihood Mancast. Join today. Please help us out with a like, comment, share, and subscribe. And check us out at manlihood.com.